Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. This time we'll talk about item 13 in the syllabus entitled movement. First, let's define what is meant by movement. Movement means naql, haraka. Movement, according to Radford, is a syntactic operation where a word or a phrase is moved from one position in a structure into another one. And usually this movement takes place from a lower position into a higher position. That is, this word or this phrase is moved from a lower position into a higher one. Movement is usually divided into two different types: subject raising, رفع مستوى الفاعل, or sometimes called subject to subject raising or internal subject hypothesis, and passivization. First, let's talk about the first part, the first type of movement, which is subject raising. According to the minimalists, they say that the subject first originates in a thematic marked specifier position within a verb phrase, and then it is moved into a case marked specifier position within an IB phrase by application of phrasing. Let's clarify this point. According to the minimalist, the subject of the sentence, first of all, is built, originates within a verb phrase, and then by a process of movement, by a process of raising, it is raised from the subject of the verb phrase into the subject of the IP. By the way, we mean by IP phrase auxiliary phrase. You know, the auxiliary phrase, according to the minimalist, is the highest phrase in structure. This type of movement, by the way, usually takes place in certain types of verbs. These are called movement verbs. يعني verbs such as seem, as you see here, or a verb like appear, and so on and so forth. Happen also, and we have turn out. Let's talk about this example now. Example number 1. You see that it seems that he understands her. It seems that he understands her. Here we have a matrix clause. The whole clause, it seems that he understands her, is a matrix clause. يعني the one that includes complement that clause. So we have two clauses: the matrix clause, the Harry clause, where the subject is it for seems, and then in the that clause, that complement clause, he here functions as the subject of the verb understand. So by a process of movement, we move the subject here, he, to function now as the subject of the matrix clause. So then we get he seems to understand her, where we change that clause into an infinitive clause or subjectless infinitive clause. The same thing in example number 2. It would appear that they are lying. Here also we have a matrix clause, the bigger clause, which is it would appear that they are lying. Inside this clause we have complement that clause, which is that they are lying. So here they, as you see, they functions as the subject of what? Of lying here, or of the auxiliary are. So sometimes when we move this subject here by changing the clause from that clause into infinitive clause, Now what happens? The subject they is moved, is raised. يرفع المستوى ماله from a subject of the internal that complement clause into the subject of the matrix clause, where here its functions are the subject of the auxiliary would. In order to illustrate subject raising process as the first type of movement, now let's go and talk about the tree diagram as in number 7 here. As in number 7, you see here you have this example. The man understand the situation. Here we have a verb phrase. The man is the DP, noun phrase. Understand is the verb, and the situation is the terminal phrase, or it is the object of understand. So here the man functions as the subject of understand. First, it originates, it is born within a verb phrase. Now we go further deep in order to give more detailed analysis, tree diagram analysis. So when we say the man understand the situation here, and here we have the man to understand the situation here, you see that. It is said that here the man first here in this sentence here, it functions first of all, as the what? As the DP, the man. It functions as the subject of the V bar. V bar means, by the way, incomplete verb phrase, a verb phrase without a determiner. So the DP, the man, first functions as the subject of understand within the verb phrase. When we move it here by an application of movement or raising, we raise its level. So now it becomes the subject of what? The subject here of the infinitive to. The subject of the infinitive to. By the way, when we move the subject, you see that here, it leaves a trace. يتركن other, it becomes an empty category. That is why here, in order to identify its previous position with the symbol T here for a trace, where it is moved from this position into this position. Let's take another example, diagram number 9. The man, or let's go, better to go now to example number 10, where we have a comprehensive example here. You see that? By the way, here it is said that the subject is moved from one position into another, from a lower position into a higher position in a cyclic fashion. We have a gradual cyclic fashion, not directly but a gradual movement, نقلة تدريجية, just like the chess game. We move the pieces of chess from one place step by step. So the same thing here. So let's take this example here. The men do seem where we have auxiliary phrase to understand the situation. You see in this diagram, according to the minimalists, they say that first of all the subject, the man here, the DP, determined phrase, noun phrase, originates as what? As the subject of the verb phrase understand, or V bar, understand the situation, and then it is moved one step further, one step higher, to function here as the subject of the infinitive phrase, IP here for infinitive phrase. By the way, when it is moved from the verb phrase here as the subject of understand to the subject of the infinitive to, it leaves a trace. يتركن أثر مكان الأصل هنا اللي نقل من عنده. And in a later movement, it is moved once again to function as the subject of what? Of the verb phrase. The men seem to understand the situation, and you see finally it is moved here to function as the subject of the auxiliary do. So this is the movement. So it is a syntactic process whereby a word or a phrase, this time a phrase which is a noun phrase, is moved from a lower position into a higher position. You have to keep in mind we do not have a direct movement, but we have recycling gradual movement where the phrase or the word is moved gradually from one lower position to higher one by one, as we have seen in this example. By the way, you have to keep in mind also that as you see clearly here, just I want to remind you once again, the subject raising process, or subject to subject raising, or sometimes it is called internal subject hypothesis. And according to the minimalists, the subject first originates within a verb phrase. This is called the thematic marked specified position, and then it is moved by a process of movement, the final one here, to function as the subject of the auxiliary phrase. In this case, it occupies what is called a case marked specifier position. This is the first part of the video, by the way. In the next part, we are going to talk about the second type of movement, which is passivization,